races shake out. I think even as we're having this bigger conversation about how Trump won the popular vote in a way that feels really surprising, it's worth looking to why he didn't have the coattails necessarily needed. In a rightward swing we're seeing across the country, the Republican Party, we'll see how all these votes get counted, but is likely to have the smallest House majority in, I think, over 100 years, maybe 110 years. The fact that there were Trump Slotkin voters in Michigan, Trump Baldwin voters in Wisconsin, Trump Rosen voters in Nevada, all of that is going to force us, I think, among many things, to really evaluate what is going on here and what comes next for the party.
There's the evaluation piece of it, Amanda, and then there's also the work that you do, recruiting, supporting candidates down ballot, always understanding that those races were going to be absolutely critical. I think a lot of the action that we're going to see in the next few years is going to come from state legislatures. And I mean that both state legislatures that are controlled by Republicans and are going to lurch things to the right, and state legislatures controlled by Democrats who are going to see themselves as a sort of final line of defense against what is happening federally. Senator Elizabeth Warren, writing in Time magazine something that sounded as though it could have come from you, whether it's stepping up to run for office, supporting a neighbor's campaign, or getting involved in an organization taking action. We all have to continue to make investments in our democracy, including in states that are passed over as too red. The political position we're in is not permanent, and we have the power to make change if we fight for it. How does this complicate, Amanda, or improve your efforts to recruit candidates down ballot?
To run for something recruits and supports young, diverse leaders running for state and local office, city council, school boards, libraries, state legislators. And I have been so inspired by the fact that since Election Day earlier this week, more than 2,000 people have raised their hands to say, I want to get in, I want to fight. And I think part of that is seeing Trump. Part of that is seeing that we did win down ballot in some really key places. Run for something candidates flipped state leg seats in North Carolina, helping break the GOP supermajority there. We also flipped state leg seats in Kentucky and Iowa, red states, but that we were able to make some inroads. I am deeply sad, but also incredibly hopeful that there are folks who see this as a moment to step up and run in red states and in blue states where we really need to give good governance.
I mean, the reality is, Chuck Todd said to me once that any state can be competitive if people do the work. And I believe that. I'm from Nebraska, and lots of talk this year, right, about Dan Osborne, who was an independent candidate in Nebraska that didn't beat Deb Fischer, but gave her a run for her money, and I think makes it, breaks down barriers so that Nebraska could potentially be a competitive place when it comes to Senate races. Tony Vargas, who was a Democratic candidate that challenged Don Bacon, he lost in a very, very narrow margin. I think it was 2.4 percentage points last cycle, or the last time Don Bacon was on the ballot against Tony Vargas. Tony Vargas lost by 2.6 percentage points. So I do believe that investment matters. Have you been getting an infusion of just energetic investment, Amanda? It always seems to me that after a presidential election where the focus has been on the top of the ticket and then Congress, sometimes people do tend to, there's a little fatigue with how the process shakes out. So folks say, well, what else can we do? Where else can we give? How else can we support? And then they look to down ballot and organizations like yours. Have you seen, I know you've seen people raise their hands to be candidates, but what about support for those candidates in terms of the monies?
Oh, we'll see. It's so early. People are so tired. And I do think you point to something really important here, which is, Run for Something's been around for 8 years. One of the biggest arguments I have had, especially with some of the major Democratic donors on the left and across the left, is why are you working in all 50 states? We should really only be focused on the presidential battlegrounds. I don't care. I remember this vividly, someone saying, I don't care about white nationalists running the state of Idaho. I was like, I think Idaho cares if there are white nationalists running the state of Idaho, and we should treat every state like a battleground state, because eventually, as you just said, if we do that, they will become battleground states. And this is true in both red and blue. We saw what happened in New York. If New York Democrats had focused a little bit more on New York over the last 4, 5, 10 years, maybe this wouldn't be the outcome we've seen.
Amanda, I agree with you 1,000% on that, because one of the important aspects of campaigning is from the bottom up, not top down, because that's where your energy is, and that's where a lot of the definitions for the campaign come from. Speaking of which, run for something is as a brand, as an idea, is an important one. The other side of that is, what are you running for? So you've got to connect that to voters. And in this election, the voters were clearly saying that the Democrats didn't connect to them on one fundamental issue, and that was the economy. And there were other issues, abortion and some cultural issues for sure. But the economy seemed to play much more of a thread than I think most people realize. So how, for those candidates that are looking to get in, how do you make those connections so that, like you said, you're running in New York, you're running in Nebraska, you're running in Maryland, that you are making the case for your race relative to the issues that those voters want?
I think this is something local candidates have in many ways a much simpler task for, because they are often talking about things really concrete, like housing, which is primarily a localized issue. And when we're talking about the economy and cost of living, housing is often what that's sort of cue for, along with things like childcare, groceries, gas. Especially with younger voters, especially with younger voters of color, especially with broadly working class voters who maybe are disproportionately renters. This is something that local governments can have a lot to do on. It has been the common thread Run for Something candidates have been running on for 8 years now, is housing.
I want to read you something from Axios, Amanda, about Leader Jeffries. Quote, nearly every Democratic leader is getting swept up in a party-wide blame game, but House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries appears to be largely evading internal backlash. House Democrats' strong performance compared to the Harris-Walz ticket gives Jeffries a chance to emerge as a singular opposition figure in the Trump administration. When we talk about party leadership, I just wonder how much you see that coming from folks like Jeffries and how much you see it coming from folks who are outside the party apparatus.
I think it's going to be a combination of the two. I really hope Jeffries has a strong backbone against the president. I'm also looking to state legislators, people like Mallory McMorrow in Michigan, Anna Eskamani down in Florida, even Lena Hidalgo, the Harris County executive down in Texas, Megan Hunt, who's been one of the leaders in the state Senate in Nebraska, and others who are both affiliated with the party, sometimes fight the party, along with, I think, hopefully a new class of leaders, a new generation who are maybe not as beholden to the civility, decorum, we must be kind, willing to fight like middle school girls, which I think is a good thing in this case.
Amanda, stick with us, because Mini Tamaraju joins our conversation to talk about how voters showed up again to support access to abortion. And later, New York Democrat Pat Ryan tells us how he won a tough race to keep his House seat. You are watching The Weekend.
Dinner time distress is out.
Grocery store schleps are out.
Wallet draining delivery fees are out.
Convenience over quality is out, out, out.
Because with Cook Unity, leaving it to professional chefs is in.
Ready to enjoy weekly deliveries are in.
Chickpea Buddha Bowls, in.
Adobo flat iron steak,
In.
And so in.
and a big sigh of relief, that's in too.
Cook Unity, the chef is in.
Here at home tonight, news of every imaginable shape and size. A lot of the big news in the country and in the world right now is still developing tonight. Now is the time, so we're gonna do it. Settle in, I have a story to tell you. Watch this space.
Americans voted overwhelmingly in favor of abortion rights last week, voting to protect the procedure in 7 of the 10 states where it was on the ballot. Yet many of those same voters also supported Donald Trump, the man who repeatedly bragged about his role in overturning Roe versus Wade. So now, with Republicans on the verge of complete control of Washington, Trump's presidency threatens to upend the very rights the majority of Americans voted to protect. Can someone say national ban? Joining us now, Reproductive Freedom for All, President Minnie Timaraja. Minnie had me laugh here for a second. She's chucking off on the side. And Amanda Littman is back with us. Welcome, Minnie.
Well, Minnie, well, what did you think about the results of the election? When it comes to the
I'm like, Simone.
The way Minnie was looking at me.
See, that's what I'm saying. Thank you. So, folks, just so you know, it wasn't just me, okay?
Minnie's like, what are y'all doing? We just asking about the abortion amendment.
It was, we're like, what do you think about the election? And I'm like, Simone, that is a loaded question. I have so many feelings
About them all.
We have a couch.
I don't
over
have
here.
time for therapy this morning, but I'll come back.
Okay.
Look, abortion won, clearly and unequivocally. However, there was a disconnect for voters between voting for the ballot measures and the issue. And I know you had Rachel Sweet on yesterday. She's brilliant. When voters went into the ballot box, went into vote, they were able to talk about the need. They were able to identify the need to protect their own rights. They were not able to connect that to the candidate at the top. I will argue that down ballot, particularly in these really tight Senate races,